Some silences feel preloaded, like they're waiting inside the phone before it even rings. The sound of fabric snapping against my knuckles as I folded the laundry was the only thing I could hear when David's name appeared on the screen. I still hesitated. Not because I didn't want to answer, just that I already knew it wouldn't be a conversation. It never was. "There's a family meeting this Sunday at the house." His tone was crisp, almost kind. "It's just family, Ellie. I'm sure you've got stuff going on." That word again. Just. I let the washer hum over whatever he might have said next. The lint on my sleeve caught my eye, small, soft, colourless. I brushed it away, even though it wasn't doing any harm. The call ended before I could think of a single sentence that wouldn't make me sound dramatic or bitter or worse. Hopeful. I opened the Bennett's group chat out of habit. The banner still read, "Our circle, no outsiders." A joke someone once made, maybe Dad, back when things weren't sorted by subtext. There, it was, a photo of Mom at the dining table with a printed guest list in hand. The caption, "Need to finalize food choices for the 18. Ellie doesn't eat meat, right?" Oh well. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked in the message field. Nothing come out. The white blouse I'd folded still had the faint crease from the hanger. I smoothed it again, then again, and realized I couldn't remember the last time anyone asked me to bring a side dish, or even to show up. Not for holidays, not for announcements, just a warm silence where I used to be. I once sent them a photo of a book I worked on, my name in the credits, bottom right. No one responded. David sent a meme 2 hours later. Everyone laughed. I checked my calendar. Sunday had nothing but a dentist appointment I hadn't confirmed. That night, I left the laundry basket full and untouched at the foot of my bed. The room smelled faintly of detergent and something else I couldn't name, like paper that's been folded and refolded too many times. Maybe they assumed I'd understand. Maybe I was never supposed to ask. I set my phone face down, the screen still lit. It buzzed once before going dark. I didn't check who it was. It's just family. And somehow that was the part that stayed. There's a particular kind of effort that leaves no evidence behind. I once ironed the napkins for Mom's anniversary dinner, each fold pressed sharp as if that precision might count for something. David brought flowers 20 minutes late and got credit for the whole evening. I cleared the dishes while they reminisced about how thoughtful he'd always been. "Thank God your brother remembered the cake." Mom lifted a glass of Chardonnay, her ring clicking softly against the stem. I'd ordered the cake, picked it up in the rain, carried it 4 blocks on foot so Dad could still park close. Even as a child, I learned to offer up the bigger slice without waiting to be told. Ethan got the last scoop of ice cream because he was younger and I didn't ask twice. Someone once called me mature for it. That made me try harder. David needed help with his college application essay. I stayed up past midnight, fixing commas and pacing his metaphors, then watched him take the scholarship without once mentioning I'd ever read the thing. I remember his voice that morning. Guess they saw potential. Finally. I nodded. I'd seen it too, line by line. At work, Julie brought me coffee last Tuesday and mentioned Thanksgiving. Doing anything with your family. The words slid out before I could reroute them. We're not that close. Just different schedules, that's all. She smiled like she believed me. Or wanted to. I didn't tell her about the year I booked flights home early, only to learn the dinner had been moved again, and no one thought to update me. They said they assumed I'd be too tired from work. I ate a cold sandwich alone in my apartment while their photos went up in real time. "You've always been a bit sensitive, Dad," once muttered after I asked if they'd forgotten me on purpose. "We just thought you wouldn't want to be in the way." I remember my shoelace was untied. I bent down to fix it and never found the right moment to stand up again. None of it was loud, none of it public, just quiet rearrangements, little edits to the version of me they found more manageable. I kept smoothing edges they never noticed. Sometimes I wonder if I made it too easy to forget I was ever there. I still keep that ironed napkin tucked in the back of my kitchen drawer. It smells faintly of lemon and starch. Still folded, still sharp. Some erasures happen in handwriting first. I kept the photograph pressed between the pages of an old anthology I never finished. The paper had curled at the corners, the image fading into a dull palette of beige and grey. David's graduation. Everyone standing straight-backed under the university arch. I was in the far left, cropped by shadow, my face half-turned. On the back someone had written in blue ink, Elaine. Far left, maybe? That maybe stung more than the name. I never corrected it. The Christmas card came a few years later. Red and silver, embossed with the Bennets wish you joy. A collage of matching sweaters and hot cocoa smiles. No mention of me. No address label with my name. It was mailed to the building, but not my unit. "You didn't respond to the card," Mom's voice over voicemail clipped. "I hope that doesn't mean you're holding a grudge. I'd already thrown it away." The foil ink caught the light as I dropped it in the trash. The envelope from the quarterly review had arrived months before. My first editorial byline. I brought it home, left it open on the dining table during one of the few dinners I'd attended. Dad glanced at it, then passed it to Mom with a nod. "Did you see the piece on David's firm in the Times?" She reached for the salt, like nothing had happened. "He's really doing something with that startup." I folded the envelope quietly, slid it into my coat pocket, and finished my soup. At 17, I crashed my bike, turning too fast down Lincoln Avenue. Gravel tore through my knee. I sat in the ER for 2 hours alone, while a nurse helped me call the house. "We already left," Sweetheart Dad's voice was calm. "Flights don't move just because of scrapes. They brought me a keychain from the resort. It said, 'Relax.' I still keep it in the junk drawer. There's no one moment, no single offense that could be circled in red. Just layers, thin, countless, almost invisible, settling into the seams of memory." I flipped the photo back over, traced my silhouette with a fingertip. My sweater looked off-white, or maybe that was just the lighting. Not hate, not cruelty, just absence. Absence so thorough it started to look like fact. I folded the picture carefully, tucked it back into the anthology, and closed the book without marking the page. Some betrayals arrive folded like polite requests. I read the message twice. The wording was careful, almost affectionate. "Just a little favor, dear. You've always had the strongest credit. The bank trusts you." A small ask dressed in soft vowels and justified by math. I left it unread. The next morning, David's name appeared on my screen. I let it ring until the vibration stopped. It started again, almost immediately. The fourth time I answered. "Everything's nearly in place. The venue just needs the final payment cleared." A pause, shallow breath. "You'd just co-sign. It won't impact you." I didn't speak. "You know how these things work. It's a formality. You're reliable. You always have been. Reliable." The word thudded in my chest like a dropped spoon in an empty room. After the call ended, I opened my email. The subject line read, "Action required. Loan authorization packet. The document was already filled out. My full name sat neatly at the bottom next to a grayed-out signature line. Dated, submitted. I scrolled through the file. Line after line of figures I didn't recognize, expenses I hadn't approved. A deposit for a floral wall, a champagne tower, custom calligraphy menus. My name floated beneath them like an afterthought, as if I'd nodded along the entire time. They hadn't asked because they never believed I would say no. My old sweatshirt hung on the back of the chair. The fabric had thinned at the elbows. A faint circle of coffee stained one sleeve, faded but still there. I traced it with my thumb, thinking of the morning I spilled it, while answering a call from Mom, trying to explain why I couldn't fly home for the brunch she forgot to tell me about. You're always so hard to reach. Honestly, it's exhausting. The blinds fluttered. A loose thread curled at the hem of the curtain, catching the breeze. I watched it sway for a moment longer than necessary. Reliable. That word again. Their safety net. Their fallback plan. The scaffolding they never thanked, only leaned on. I moved the cursor to the decline button, but didn't click. Instead, I unplugged the computer gently, like handling something that could break if touched too firmly. It wasn't the signature, it was the assumption, and I'd lived under it long enough. Some departures don't need a door closing. They begin with a drawer left open just long enough to remember what's worth taking. I packed without noise. No suitcases with wheels. No farewell posts. Just a duffel bag, a jacket with a broken zipper, 3 books that had margin notes in my own handwriting, and the old leather-bound notebook Aunt Ruth once gave me. Most of the pages were blank. The few that weren't felt like someone else had written them. I left the framed photo face down on the shelf. I didn't wrap it, didn't slide it between clothes, just turned it toward the wall where the dust had settled unevenly along its edge. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead as I pulled the key from the hook and placed it on the counter. I didn't text Mr. Hopkins. I knew he wouldn't ask questions. Some people are skilled at pretending they never noticed a disappearance. At the subway station, a woman clutched a child who kept dropping his stuffed bear. A man next to her held 2 coffee's lids pressed tightly. I sat at the far end of the bench and folded my hands around nothing. No one was coming to say goodbye. That had once felt like a punishment. Now it felt like relief. The flight was quiet. I stared out the window as the clouds pulled apart like fabric under tension. I thought about the last thing David said. You've always been the one we could count on. Don't ruin that now. Not thank you. Not how are you. Just a gentle warning dressed as a compliment. The sky over Portland was the color of stone when I landed. My coat absorbed the rain in patches, shoulders first, then sleeves. I didn't call anyone. There was no one to call. I walked until the sidewalks narrowed, until I found a bookstore with a faded sign and a crooked red door. Behind it, a narrow staircase led to a rental room with a single window. The lamp beside the bed flickered when I plugged it in, then held steady. I watched it for a moment, waiting for it to falter again. No one asked me to explain why I was there. Not the man who handed me the key, not the woman behind the cafe counter downstairs, not the stranger who nodded as we passed on the sidewalk. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't part of anyone's version of myself, and that was enough. Some quiets aren't empty, they just take getting used to. I walked without purpose the first few mornings. No destination, no list, no name tag. My shoes picked up dirt in places maps don't mark. The leather cracked a little at the toes. I didn't clean them. I brewed tea without boiling over, without glancing at the clock. The mug was chipped on one side. I used it anyway, There was no one to remind me which cup looked nicer or that company might stop by. The scarf I hadn't worn in years smelled different after I washed it clean with no trace of lavender detergent from home. Just cotton and faint heat from the sun. I draped it over the chair and let it wrinkle. I sat by the window in the rental watching a boy across the street draw shapes in the fog of a cafe window. He wasn't waiting for anyone, just drawing, erasing, starting again. I opened my notebook and wrote down single words, not plans, not questions, just sounds I didn't want to forget. Mist, sapwood, unnamed. At a narrow park by the shoreline, I noticed a woman crouched beside a patch of wildflowers. Her coat was unzipped. She wore one red glove, one blue. She caught me looking. Funny, isn't it? She pointed at a yellow bloom tangled in ivy. They show up when they shouldn't. I didn't answer right away. She didn't seem to mind. Later, she told me her name was Emma. She asked what the earth smelled like to me after rain. I said it smelled like someone had forgiven it. We didn't exchange occupations or last names. She didn't mention siblings. I stopped reaching for my phone at lunch. The silence felt less like forgetting and more like space. I read without underlining. I walked without retracing. No one reminded me to call. No one corrected my memory. No one asked for the clean version of events. At the end of that week, I found a handwritten note inside the notebook, one I didn't remember leaving. You don't owe anyone the polished version of your absence. I folded it back into the spine and let the page fall shut. Later that evening, I wrote one line across the top margin, uneven and plain. Freedom isn't a celebration. It's the exhale after you take off something too tight. Sometimes the absence of a question says more than all the answers ever could. The kettle hissed once, then stilled. I didn't pour the water right away. My phone vibrated 3 times in a row, same name each time. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, folded it over the edge of the sink, and let the phone keep glowing. Call me back, sweetheart. We're all worried. Can't you just help us this once? It's not a big deal. Just a signature. You always had the best credit. I didn't reply. I watched the steam fade off the glass and disappear. The tea bag still sat in its foil wrapper. Another message. Ellie, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Lauren's not sleeping. Still nothing about where I was. Not a word about how I'd vanished. No one asked why. In the family thread, they posted a picture of floral arrangements. Final pick thoughts, a photo of table numbers laid out on a hardwood floor. Someone mentioned the deposit. Still $2,800 short. Due Friday. No tags. Just an invisible assumption that I'd see it, that I'd act. David again. You've always come through. Don't stop now. Not over this. I opened a drawer and found an old envelope I hadn't used. I ran my thumb along the crease. Blank. Unused like a space they kept open in case I returned to fill it. Not one message read. Where are you staying? Not one said, Are you okay? Only versions of do what you've always done. Reliable. Dependable. Predictable. That was the word Lauren used once when I stayed late to clean after her bridal shower. You're so good at disappearing into the background. She smiled, stacking plates into my arms. I picked up the phone not to answer, but to silence it. The notifications blinked red like warnings, though I already knew what they meant. I opened the window. The street outside buzzed with lives that didn't need my participation. For a moment, I imagined answering, signing the papers, smoothing things over, playing the part. Then I looked at my mug on the table, still empty. I hadn't even steeped the tea. That, I realized, was the difference. This time, I noticed the emptiness and chose not to fill it. Choosing what stays has taught me more than mourning what left. The new apartment isn't much, just a twin bed, a cracked window that sticks when it rains, and a second-hand bookshelf I painted blue. I chose the shade myself. It clashes with the walls, and I don't mind. In the mornings I sit on the floor with my back against the radiator legs, crossed tea cooling beside me. I listen not for voices, but for quiet. A tiny notebook sits on the sill. In it, I've started writing again. Not for anyone. No deadlines, no edits, just a line at a time, like relearning a language I forgot I once spoke. Mo brought over a basket of soap bars last Tuesday, chamomile and mint. Calms everything she smiled. Her hands were cracked from stirring lye, her nails short clean. Ben plays guitar for kids at the shelter near Powell Street. They like the loud ones best. He laughed, handing me a splintered pick shaped like a heart. We sat on the back porch that evening, 3 folding chairs, 1 lantern, cheap wine. I laughed at something small and meaningless, not because I was supposed to, just because I did. I remembered how I used to measure invitations. What will they think if I come? Will I take up too much space? Now, I ask something simpler. Do I feel like going? I make lentils the way I like them overcooked with too much garlic. I take long walks without checking my phone. No one's waiting, and that feels honest. Then the screen lit up again. Don't destroy everything just because you're upset the message read. You're still part of this family. No greeting, no question, just correction. I stared at the words for a long time. I didn't explain. I didn't draft a reply. I didn't save it for later. I deleted it with the same motion I used to close a drawer, fold, a blanket, press a leaf between pages. A quiet, finished thing. There was a time I would have read it twice, tried to interpret tone, wondered what she meant by everything. Wondered if I was being cruel. Wondered if I owed softness just for being born to her. But softness, when demanded, turns brittle. I wrapped the phone in a scarf and left it in the drawer. The tea had gone cold again. This time I didn't warm it back up. Finality isn't loud. It doesn't need witnesses. I wrote the letter slowly without editing, without revisiting the tone. It wasn't addressed to my mother, not to David. It was for the bank, short, factual, free of pleasantries. I withdrew my name from all pending documents related to the Bennett family's accounts. I didn't offer a reason. I didn't owe one. The keys clinked softly when I opened the bottom drawer. A worn manila folder waited inside birth certificate, social security copies, college forms, still bearing my childhood handwriting. Each page had once meant identity. Now they only meant expectation. I folded the papers without ceremony, slid them into a plain envelope. On the front I wrote the old address. Inside I added a single line in black ink. I no longer carry this title. No stamp of rebellion, no legal declaration. Just a quiet severing, like pulling the final thread from a seam that never fit. I deleted the group chat. The little bubble with David's name vanished. So did the threads titled Menu Options and Who's Booking Hotel Blocks. I removed myself from the shared calendar, marked Family Week. No one would likely notice until something was late or missing. That had always been my role, to notice for them. On my public profile, I changed the name. Not drastic, just Eleanor G. A subtle shift, but I saw it. I chose a new photo fog over a pine-covered hill. Nothing sharp, nothing exact. It felt closer to how I exist now, untethered, present, hard to pin down. I didn't cry. I didn't feel weight lift. There was no swelling music, just a click of the trackpad and a silence that wasn't hollow, it was whole. Later, I sat in the corner of the cafe off Alberta Street. A saxophone whispered through the speakers, something from the 40s. My mug left a faint ring on the table. I opened the leather notebook, the one with creases at the corners and ink smudges from uncertain hands. I wrote, what I let go of was never family. It was the script I'd been handed, the role I was expected to play without reading the lines first. Then I closed the cover. Not because the thought was finished, but because it finally didn't need an ending. I don't measure mornings by alarms anymore. The kettle hummed low on the stove while I sat near the window, holding a mug that still remembered the shape of my hands. Earl Grey steeped longer than recommended steam, curling like soft punctuation. Below, a dog tugged at its leash, the owner half singing to something only they could hear. The sky wasn't bright, but it wasn't heavy. Just there. A towel hung on the sill, old threadbare Ruth's initials, still faint on the edge. It didn't ache anymore to touch it. It was warm fabric, nothing more. And somehow that meant everything. I flipped through the notebook. Pages once blank, now filled not with gratitude as duty, but with glimpses. I chose to keep Cold Finger's hot tea. Someone's laugh across the balcony. I no longer brace myself. No italics, no underlines, just sentences with breath between them. Emma knocked gently, left a paper bag and a bunch of chamomile tied with twine. No heavy questions, no probing eyes. Any plans today? Not much, I replied. But enough. We sat without filling the space. Silence didn't need to be managed anymore. It simply lived beside us, not between. I opened the window, not because it was stuffy, but because I could. The breeze smelled like wet pavement and lavender. I didn't reach for my phone. No part of me expected it to buzz. The tea cooled. I sipped anyway. Before the day stretched further, I wrote one more line in the notebook. Silence is no longer shelter. It's home. No need for a return call. No final word. No audience. Just this breath, warmth, stillness. And me. Not proving, just being.